Soji Sonan Sanju Badu Dani Jasuhochi Dagi Shijin Jive Sananji Dola Benji Sanji Ruba Shu Sadana Mimidam Munji Yambodan Jajala Chujala Shawashaba Sanje Sumbarado Shishin de Vejuru Jibata Jesa Bechin Dini Dishi Teve Jajin Yunerin Jesavi de Jubatin Jebasala Chutu Teshin Kuwai De la Benjamin Tunza Yemina, Abedani Levatula. To the Sunyan, Namosa Gana, Bokan, to Bundana American, Tisa. Tamja Gadu, Dagus, and Congregating Jojo, Gabame Bachim. Yevame Batang, Bohom, about that imitation with Giovanni Jesitam. So you Sanja Mananje, Tamba de la Chata. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, that. Oh, yeah, they are only the cars, Jangola, Jango, Chemboki, the cars of Dina, Toji Dulemanala. Oh, London, Queen, Toy, Tombi me, Yanda Tui, German, Masana, La Mission, Tabi, Chonjitu, Juba, Casa, Juba, New Calanus, Teta Siena. And Casa Mibam Chejetan, the moon Janju Choni Shejavi, Shula Chodabata Rabari, Simbarmeba, Guna Ship to Jang, Chene. Oh, that or the song body. Oh, what the Carson Reyes and Landonella, Queen Tombi Min, Sigana, Marando, I know Kwanju Dom, Alangata, Twajaki, Yamsu Lembala. 아니 냠수 렌셈 바 미셰바 톰니 톰바게 아니 가서 민바 나도나 그네 톰이 미시 나도나 그네 양다 트위 된자이 민바 세와 쳐발라 아니 가르고 그래서나 아니 태와 양다 트위 드미 마사나 세가라 아니 태와 셰디 랑도게 내라 몽바게 아니 민바지 봐 세와세 양다 퇴위 때문에 마사나 세대 야 대송가 양다 퇴위 때문에 마사나 다 퇴와 마셔 봐 알랑당 랑자단 주비 림바테다 마셔나 아니 주바게 람 메셔나 라미셔나 타비 전전저도 아니 코와타다 빵와게 코와 진도게 림바 마셔나 아니 냥수 렌세 아니 방자 봉조장 얼랑자 냥수 연수 메시바 인상 아니 타바 코와타다 그 동아타다 녀와라 샤바게 아니 타바게 총치도 주바 누구 말이 야 그래서
So yes, as J. Rinpoche, Gyaltsong Kaba has said in his prayer, which possesses great aspiration, he said that at this moment in time, when we've fallen into a situation in which we are, as it were, sunk into great darkness, in that we don't understand at this moment in time what it is that we need to practice, what it is we ought to do, what it is we ought to abandon, things that we should avoid, that is. We don't understand what it is that causes us to be trapped in samsara, and we don't know what it is that would enable us to become free from samsara. When we find ourselves in a situation like this, if we don't apply ourselves towards learning the method which would enable us to become free from samsara, then there's no way at all that we will ever be able to find a way out of the situation that we're in, the samsaric situation. That is, without properly studying all of the various stages, the sequence by which we enter into samsaric existence, as well as the methods and the stages of the methods by which we're able to free ourselves from samsaric existence, then there's no way to dispel this kind of cloud of darkness, of ignorance, which we currently find ourselves in and which causes us to be sunk into the ocean of samsara.
Oh, yeah. 가서 라미샤나 탑이 총조도 아니 가서 주변이고 말했어. 대신 치나 아니 다 다시 쉬와 나시 전에 매밤 치지 숑 아니 매밤 치지 자 아니 지지 잡아고 먹기 아니 잠시 대가라 써와 로아 매밤 치지 숑당 잠린전 제월십에 전주 총이 시에 제와서 이거는 아니 잠린 제주 루루다 토면서 써와게 아니 다 약하게 숑 대달라 다들 맛신도 장네 와 숑라 초를 와다 라바레 숑 초를 와다다 아니 숑그 라바레 아니 시와게 아니 침발 마셔봐 숑 탐자당 아니 숑데 탈침바데 아니 장바 쳐야지 다 개쳐버려 전에 숨어인 바래.
So what this means, the intention behind this, is that we shouldn't be satisfied with just having a kind of rough understanding of these topics. That is the subject of the path, which enables us to understand what is to be avoided and what is to be taken up in practice. Rather, we should apply ourselves to gain a detailed and profound understanding of all of the great expositions of the path, such as are found in the teachings of Lord Buddha himself, of course, but also the way these are explained in the great teachings of the Master Arya Manjushri and Maitreya, as well as the way that they're explained in the Indian Panditas, the masters that followed after Lord Buddha and Manjushri and Maitreya, such as Nagarjuna and Asanga, as well as the other great Indian masters that followed after them. So we shouldn't be satisfied with just kind of a rough understanding, coarse understanding of the path. Rather, we need to understand it in detail and sort of strive to gain that kind of detailed understanding.
Oh yeah, that tender way. 아니 다 가서래. 아니 남양수련발라 태와 가치와 이거다. 다 대신고하래. 총기 내가 수양. 아니 태외 최남 시와주. 태외 딜란 도바시. 태외 더만 임바봉. 태외 양아 대와 톱 전에 오 태와 채와라 때네. 아니 취지 최남지 내주 시와. 아니 태와라 때네 다지 공도 셔봐 나시 랑도게 내 시니 아니 랑자 아니 가서 냠수 련바다 왕자 아니 네바 미게와라 소라 도바 인장 태외 딜란 도바 치시가 아니 주름지 나와 된 태외 퇴마 인바 봉시가 태와 채와라 퇴단 퇴마 인베 나바 시니 아니 퇴 두고와 인장 아니 주름지라에 시체디 아니 등에지 나왔대. 퇴양한 대와 톱 시가나 아니 퇴와 채와라 때네. 아니 신내지 참바기. 아니 시에서 남지 시라고 상동 토에. 우리 강가가 다 퇴와라 때네 용가인자. 퇴외 딜에 더바지 퇴외 퇴마 임바보. 퇴양한 대와 톱 세와 오두신 바리.
And this is expressed equally in the Udana Varga, the collection of expressive sayings by Lord Buddha himself, where Lord Buddha said that it's through study, that means literally it says hearing, but this encompasses all forms of hearing the teachings, studying the teachings, and so forth. It's by hearing that we understand the things that are to be abandoned. It's by hearing that we understand what is valuable and what is not valuable. And then likewise through hearing or study, through which we achieve nirvana. So this verse encompasses all of the three higher trainings of the path. It's through study and reflection, study of the teachings that we understand what we're supposed to avoid. And that's the key characteristic of the training in ethical conduct. And then it's also through hearing and studying the teachings that we are gain an understanding of how to develop proper meditative concentration. And so with ethical conduct as a foundation, then we can develop higher meditative concentration. And then based upon that, we're able to develop the wisdom that understands the nature of reality, which is the direct instrument by which we achieve liberation from samsara or nirvana. So all of these three higher trainings of the path are founded on that practice of study.
Oh yeah, that tender we any to watch about any to you tended there, any she had a career, and it are Casore Number Sanjavi, Dumbatang, Damba, and it's Haman at the Casore, a Ribayanda Dana party. A Dumban Ribayanda Dana party, Taman to be Liu, see Gana, Taman to be Lucidang, Namde Liu Shiore. Digli Lu Tambo Digi, other Randon Jeba, Sirigala, Anita Casore, Dayanda Canasha, Tabata Tamja Cheba, Druba Cheba, Daji, Duja Daji, Duja Bobin, Casson, Chulude, Aranda Jabaki, that thing I ordered. That under the Lu, Niwa Digi, Anita Chisho della, Chamadubi Lu, Sigala, Jumden de Di, Maranzu. 좀 전에 이 어딘데 가서래 따바란 좀 끼고 많이 봐. 믿음 줄에 껴와다 주매를 껴와야 많이 봐. 지금 그 봐봐야 많이 봐. 어느 때마다 간들에서는 아니 오고 통화 매반은 알아도 나시 전에 타마와 치워꾼데지 임발라. 아니 림바 시도 남지름 봐. 이 림바 시도 공네. 아니 때마다 재미있고 좀네. 我怎么参加救我参加救主要的，人家告诉我的，怎么参加救主要的，人家都接单的了，人家参加这边留这个留年我的嘛都行吧的。
So then the way in which we can gain an understanding of the basic nature of the path as well as the results that come from the path is through study, as we said, and this subject that we are studying today is the compendium of valid cognition, or it's called Pramanavarttika in Sanskrit by the master Dharmakirti, and Indian master Dharmakirti. And this text, the title is a collection or explanation of the avenues of valid cognition or authoritative knowledge. And this overall text is subdivided into 4 chapters. The first chapter explains reasoning for oneself, and specifically the process of inference. Inference is the means by which we gain an inferential understanding of things, which entails laying out the basic process by which evidence is presented, which is able to establish proofs, different kinds of argumentation and proofs through reasoning. So through inference, we gain a certain kind of authoritative knowledge or valid cognition of things. And so the first chapter lays out how that is done, the various parts of syllogistic reasoning, as well as the different kinds of proofs and fallacies and so forth that are done as far as reasoning is applied to oneself. Then the second chapter is called the establishment of valid cognition as it pertains to the Buddha as an authoritative teacher. So the literal title of the second chapter is an exposition of how the Buddha became a valid teacher. So valid cognition in this context refers to the Buddha as a teacher of teachings that are authoritative and that can be relied upon. So this chapter presents a number of different topics, but focuses upon how it is that the Buddha has become a person of valid authority, authoritative knowledge that we can rely upon. And it does that by describing the process by which the Buddha achieved that state. Originally, the Buddha was no different from ourselves. That is, he was just an ordinary person. But it was only through following a process of development that he or she became an authoritative person. And so the way this is presented is through showing the characteristics of the Buddha. The Buddha is not a person that was authoritative beginninglessly, that is permanently without any sort of change. It's not, a Buddha doesn't occur without any kind of causes, such that a Buddha occurs spontaneously. Buddha does not occur from causes that are not in accordance with the kind of result that a Buddha is. And so this chapter presents all of these topics, as well as showing the process by which the Buddha achieved the state of authority that is found within within a person who has become a Buddha.
Oh yeah, that is 가르쳐오래서는 다 전달적으로 చే서나 좀 된데 참아줘 봤죠. 다디 저저 코랄라 전화 아니 또자 타르바타 탐제 쳐봐. 그러와 타르바니 아니 거기 동안이 어르시니시 아니 탐제 쳐봐니 아디 저저이 말이. 그러와 어느 다 된다위 또자 타바타 탐제 쳐봐디 아니 자주 쉬와 나신 아니 누지를 받아 아니 마 누지를 받디 딘땡 거 말이. 아니라 아니 니기 가서 오래 또봐 참만 이제 참미주고 루바기 아니 단다 가르서나 슝기 셔바 슝 가르래서나 슝데 아니 다서 오래 로방 초랑 아니 가게 셔바 거봐 사야지 아니 초랑 아니 참아 군대지 아니 최제디 말에 그와 오 슝기 셔바 거봐더라 아니 뒤 초랑기 슝기 셔바데라 참나 주반 돌아 팬셔바 덤바데 시점라 차차로 세데 아니 슝데 그때 안다 때라 배바달라 아니 참아 주베레 어디 용거 와리 와 다디 슝기 아니 간데레 사람 참아 주반 돌아 팬셔바 아니 덤바데 시점라 차차로 또更안 좋아 라세바 참아 주바 수시 셔바 차 세데 다디 슝데 뒤태레 是吧？我兄弟那团大的结果话的，在那看着是那参谋主管多了判些话，都把这些叫啦，在这个确切菜，起码给多个人做做话拉准备，参谋主管出去下把枪，在这，俺那下把他们在这两个人吧的。
So the subject matter then of this second chapter, which we're studying today, and this next 2 weeks, is then how it is that a Buddha is a person of authority, or a person who is a source of valid cognition. And the basic text that Master Dharmakirti bases his exposition on is actually the first verse, the verse which is a homage and a promise to compose, which is found in the first verse of Master Dignaga's Pramanavarttika, which is a compendium of authoritative knowledge or valid cognition. And so in that verse, Master Dignaga first pays homage to the Buddha, and then he promises to compose a text which will explain the subject of avenue of valid cognition, or the means of valid cognition. In English philosophy, this is often referred to as epistemology, or theory of knowledge, and it also includes things like logic, formal logic. But in the Buddhist context here, it encompasses other topics as well. So in Master Dignaga's compendium of valid cognition, or means of valid cognition, he starts out by praising Lord Buddha as a person who has become an avenue of valid cognition, means of valid cognition. as one who wishes to help the world, as the teacher, as the Sugata. Sugata is an epithet of a Buddha as well. And then finally as the savior. And so through these 5 terms or epithets of the Buddha, he pays homage to the Buddha. And then in the second half of that verse, Master Dignaga says, makes a promise to compose this compendium of valid cognition, or compendium of epistemology, which is going to explain the basic subject of epistemology.
Oh yeah, that did kind of thing what it is, and I can't Chatalo said, someone do what Jola Pesha, but then but the shit of Chatalo said, Chata with Shisuri and that Kala Chata Grace and it's Chama Jumdende. Chama Shivani, that Jumdende, Castle, that all of my hungry. Castle Langdojin, Chijimalo, but Dumbala Chama Yimba. When they rang Langda to Jing over Tamcha and the Chijimalo by Chansi. Chemba Dadu and a shell of Domber Cheba is a Chamasi, Sungore, London to Jing over the Tabdan Java Reserve. Can't the Chama new digit? Tamjet is a Marino, Jenny, Suana Jenny, or Chatu Chama, Jumdenda Chasa Grace. On the Jumdenda Jew Chama in by Candicula Chungares and a Jew Chama the Candicula Chungares and that I think you and I say, Jimmy Ranjundan, or Tendigram Java Mare. And talk you presum soale, and it's Sama Trumbare, Jusambata Java presum sawa, Samba presum sawa, down Java presum sawa, Sama Juares. And the you presum sawa, Samba presum sawa, the Candicula res, Candicula Tumbares, and Samba presum sawa, and then Ninji Chambo, Java Ninji Chamboda, Java presum sawa, and Dameto Beshara. Some of Prism Sawale, Sambadan Java Prism Sawala, Jebu Tini Prism Sawarade, Dasha, Prism Sawage, and a Samada Trumbare.
So then, here then, the first of those epithets, these terms that are referring to the Lord Buddha, or any Buddha, is that he has become an avenue of valid cognition. Here I'm going to use the pronoun he just for convenience, but it could refer to females as well, or non-gendered beings. So a person who has become a source of valid cognition. To back up a little bit, the basic subject here is that is for a person like ourselves who wish to achieve freedom from a higher state of rebirth or liberation from samsara, we have to first of all understand what it is that we need to avoid doing, as well as what we need to do in practice in order to achieve those kinds of objectives. In order to understand what we need to take up in practice, what we need to avoid, we first of all have to learn these subjects from someone who is able to explain them in an authoritative or valid way. So that's why the first of these epithets of the Buddha, a person who has become an avenue of valid cognition or has become an authoritative person, is explained because without relying upon someone who is an authoritative source of this kind of knowledge, there's no way that we'd be able to learn it ourselves. So the treatment of this subject in the Pramanavarttika, the compendium of valid cognition by Master Dharmakirti, begins by saying that we have to understand what a Buddha is, a person who has become an avenue of valid cognition. And so in order to do that, we have to understand how it is that a person could become such an avenue of valid cognition. In order to understand that, we need to be able to realize that such a person does not occur just spontaneously. It does not occur because of causes that are incompatible with the kind of result that they have become. So we have to exclude those kinds of possibilities. So, for example, an authoritative person is not a creator God who creates the universe or something like that. Rather, it has to be a person that has achieved this status of being an authoritative person by means of a path which accords with the kind of outcome or result that they have achieved. And then following on that, we need to understand what it is that the basic character of the path that would, process that would lead to a person becoming a source of valid cognition or authority. And that in turn is that we have to understand the kind of activity that such a person would engage in, as well as the kind of attitude or motivation that they would have to engage in that activity. Those two, the activity or active part of the path, is subsumed by the wisdom that understands selflessness in this context, and then the attitude here in this particular context refers to great compassion. So by understanding what the wisdom that understands selflessness as well as what great compassion is, then we're able to understand how it is that a person could become a Buddha and thus a source of valid cognition.
Oh yeah, that is one. Dola pen sheba said, and it draw tata, Dungala draw sheba, Tuchi sheba, Tuchi shimbo. Yana draw la, and Jig to Pamba sheba, Tuchi chimbo de, the one you chimbo, some person saw what they said. Only Dola pen sheba, some of you, Dola pen sheba. Oh, some of you are pen sheba, said the Tuchi. Not any. Oh, the castle, don't buy Shawaki, don't buy Shiva, and it ended the castle, Joa Pison Sawa, Damon was into the Beshara Kota Javati. Roa, the Tachishuan Asite. And it Tendrabi, any the one in the Chamber down, and a Damon was into the Chish, Obi Sherab, and it Gomba la Den, and it Debucari to go and around the Pisum Sawa. Rande person sawa se gana ane pando ki pambata toba ki diwi ane sanje yu ende rwa tona ba yomba da shiji zuka pachada jawa pambe goden tang xieje na lu chida wa chindu ane ngosum du sipa ki toba yu ende ni wo chi jene pando ki yu de rwa rande person sawa di imbare rwa wo rande person sawa de kawa temare tikaresana Tamajuan Rola Pan Sheba, Dumban de She Jup, Silver de She said. When there was Sheba, said the Tapamba Pisun Sawati Tango Wade. There were Katizes and a Juban Yedesum de She. There were Juban and then Desum J. Segala and the Pamba Chabasum Des. The Anium by the Sea Juban Maluba Pamba. Anium by the Sea Juban Maluba, Laramito Pamba. Ani order Bambada Maliva Bambada. La Mudoba Bamba, say Gala, or Tegi, Bamba Chabasum de Jukutita.
So then, if we go through those, again, 5 epithets that are expressed at the beginning of the Pramana Samuccaya, the compendium of authoritative knowledge or valid cognition, the first one again is a person who has become a source of valid cognition. The second one is who desires to help the world, to help all living beings. The third one is teacher, and then the fourth one is sugata. The fifth final epithet is the savior. You could translate that also as protector, but here savior probably is more applicable. So the second of those epithets, the one who desires or wishes to help all living beings, that shows how the Buddha has fulfilled all of the, completed to the superlative degree that attitude of great compassion and great love for all sentient beings without any kind of discrimination and has developed that to the highest extent. And then the third epithet of teacher, in this particular context, emphasizes that he has achieved the thorough realization of the wisdom that understands selflessness, and is thus able to teach that to others as well. Then the fourth epithet, the sugata, that's referring to the achievement of the complete perfection of both his own aims as well as the aims of others. And so that means the fulfillment of the complete achievement of all abandonment of that which is to be gotten rid of, as well as the realization, the achievement of realization of all that is to be realized. The first of those is the achievement of all abandonment refers especially to that getting rid of the abandonment of the mental afflictions, the obscurations that are mental afflictions, and then the obscurations that prevent omniscience. And that has multiple subdivisions, such as getting rid of the two forms of obscurations, and then getting rid of them completely, getting rid of them such that they never arise again. Those subdivisions of that kind of the abandonment of the obscurations. And so that covers the basic characteristics of these first four of those five epithets.
Oh yeah, donna. Ane tabani den jong o nyugu tere. Wa pambate. Wa tabani den jong o nyugu o pamba o tiche. Pamba cheba sumden che. Teni ti che la shiba tobi tenji tang se chen. Je so yi ka so la shaba na se chen. Ane o toba de shi sumden de la. Ane chemba temba. Te kwana yi chemba. Che kwana ni chemba tiang. Ane chemba temba. 아니 시진에 말이 받침바 어 태권에 이제 받침바 때봐 아니 시진에 말이 받침바 제바 숨된지 또봐 아니 사바미 비시 어니 제라 또봐 대시 시비가나 이니 텐저이 방도 대시디 예봐 이네 이장 방도 대시디 투기는 나와 인장 아니 참말 좋아 전에지 Then
as far as the realization side of the achievement of that fourth epithet, the sugata. Sugata means one who has gone to bliss, or one who has gone to well-being. Difficult to translate that term into English exactly, but so I'll just use the Sanskrit sugata. So the first side of being a sugata is another name for a Buddha, is that they've achieved all of those abandonments, gotten rid of the obscurations that are mental afflictions, as well as the obscurations that are prevent omniscience in all respects. The second part of that is that they have achieved all realizations or actualization of all the positive qualities of Buddhahood, and chief among those is the achievement of the full realization of the Four Noble Truths and so forth, having gotten rid of all, achieved that kind of thorough and complete knowledge, the achievement of the omniscience, knowing all objects of knowledge as they are in their totality without any kind of limitation. So those, the achievement of the abandonment as well as the achievement of realization, then those two components of Buddhahood, in brief, those relate as well to the actualization then of the purity of the four kayas or embodiments of Buddhahood, the Nirmanakaya and so forth, the four different aspects of complete Buddhahood.
Oh yeah. That's in it at the random pinzo that and do pinzo in each bando de shede random pinzo che. That's and do pinzo de carresana, and it dewish and do pinzo so was said. The Kawatango Aresana. 참아주고 돌아 패셔봐 좀봐 대신 좀 시와게 줘봐 시와게 아니 전에 표출된 거 아니 말이야 그러와 다른 게 세바기 아니 원바 타와다 그러와 원바다 원도 onde tem de 저러 onde 쳐봐다 내가 레비 아니 동안 내가 시와기 아니 내가 레비 람 타다 아니 좀 된데 라니 지리 치다 쓰바 신도 아니 저완이 신비 그냥 랑데 아니 신라 펜비 땜비 고네 가서 좋아타다 동안라 조비치 줘봐 세대 돼 말이 봐 가야 투난 디바 취 메주시 저기 동아 차게 메세라 니지도 바샹라 봄에디 신이 땜바 좋아 주루 전에 어수와 나신 전에 오 두장 온도 두제기 탑 이렇게 주본 그 초tum래 아니 엘레 두제기 탑 아니 탑 나와서 이제 받아 아니 탐제 잡아 두제기 아니 두제기 남조 탑시 탑 쳐봐자 돈이도 베셔라다 아니 자주 그서는 이제 전부라 저와게 오탑 쳐봐자 대다 아니 랑기 치다를 조냠수 시니 냠수 시니 아니 다 땜받듯이 오기 콘도십이 대시 숨된 나와대 강하다 중화기 어디 중화 나시 전에 아니 두자 현라 땜벽하네 아니 동 두자 탐제 가서래 저 거기 동안에 줘봐 나 송고 동안에 줘봐 시시지 빨리 줘봐 어떤 게 중화에 줘봐 세대 대인 말이
Then the fifth, so the fourth of those five epithets, terms for the Buddha, the fourth one being Sugata, that refers primarily to a Buddha's actualization of their own aims. Within the two kinds of aims, one's own aims and then the aims of others, Sugata refers primarily to that. So the actualization of Buddhahood from the point of view of the person who is striving for Buddhahood for themselves. Then the fifth epithet, Savior, that refers specifically to the actualization of the aims of others. So through being motivated by great compassion and following the path to perfect awakening, one becomes a Sugata, actualizes Buddhahood, and then that in turn enables one to be able to show others exactly as you experienced it yourself, the entire path to the achievement of Buddhahood. So just as oneself has been able to actualize Buddhahood, that is through understanding what is to be taken up, what is to be abandoned, understanding the three trainings, the path, how to develop great compassion, how to understand the nature of reality. One actualizes that oneself, then just in exactly the same way that you experience that path, you motivated by the great compassion that you developed on the path, if you're able to show that to other people exactly as it is, then you are able to function as a savior of other living beings. So that's what is referred to then by this fifth epithet of savior. That is, so just as you understand what's to be taken up and abandoned and put that into practice, just as you understood and put into practice what is to be taken up and abandoned through the three trainings, just as you understood the method of developing great compassion and the perfections, and understood the nature of reality as it is, especially the nature of selflessness, the lack of intrinsic existence of things, then and use that to be able to actualize Buddhahood for yourself, you're able to show other beings, once you've achieved that status of Sugata, you're able to show others and save others from the entirety of samsara, starting with falling into the lower realms of existence, and then proceeding through even show them how to achieve the high status of rebirth into the upper realms of existence. Based upon that, how to achieve nirvana, and then how to surpass the achievement of mere nirvana for oneself, and to achieve the final status of becoming a Buddha for themselves as well.
Oh yeah, that's it. Talking about what that some of what switch shabacha said, and shabat tamcha, such a chimothy. Number 가서래 가서래 나 되게 일단 너희 아니 최지 되는지 좀 되는데 그 가르쳐서나 좀 되는데 남 광라 전에 양다바 저기 산재지 고마 온도 잡아치 온도 잡아 탐제집에 남지를 받아 상은 전에 아니 도자라 타바다 타바토베 탑 시다를 아니 대바 투몽걸 남 천이 상화 또 많이 오대 와 나한테 가서를 거와줘 이제 대다 좋아티니 된다고 하대 아니 가서 남들 그 치도 차와기 시와 차와다 공부창기 텐지 쪼어대다 대인 말이 와 너희 최지 ten이 좀 되는데 남 강나 쳐봐 세대 가래 두지 투지 komle 대세를 토마 아니 가서래 뭐 지우충을 남기를 봐 대내 지우 된다 투몽을 남라라라로 장봐 대내 지우 준비랑 남라 야 이제 전부 제대 지우 준비랑라 마로 장에 르마 시도 공부할 때는 아니 두번 춤네 르마 신이들 도바대 생아왜 되게 좀 되는 남 강라 전에 양다바 조여서 오도 잡아가 남기를 봐다 봐 다상한 얘네장 안에 가서래 누자라 아니 그 치다를 안에 오발라 치달 나와신도 아니 뭐 체두셔위 누자 대달라 아니 탑 치달 톱이 타바다 탐제 태와 라 톱을 세비 람 치달을 냠냠이 라니 그 냠수 셔와 나시 아니 땜바대라 아니 드바 투몽을 남지를 봐 년대다 란자다 아니 드바 투몽을 남지를 봐 치다라 신도 땜바대 아니 어디다 대다 좋아 되게 왔는데 시와다 공부 쳐봐기다 남들이 쳐도 자고 누자기 아니 전지 쏘어도 되래.
So then this way the path is laid out in the promise, the praise, and the expression of homage, and then the promise to compose in Master Dignaga's Pramanasammuccaya, or compendium of valid cognition, is then carried over into the Pramanavarttika, the commentary or exposition of valid cognition, which was composed by Master Dharmakirti as well. So just as Master Dignaga explained that in the first verse of his work, then in the second chapter of the Pramanavarttika, Master Dharmakirti's work, the entirety of the path of stages of the path is explained in the context of showing how a Buddha becomes an authoritative person, how they develop and that aspiration to help the world, how they become teachers, sugatas, and then saviors of all living beings. Those 5 epithets are then explained in both the kind of forward and reverse sequence in the course of the second chapter in the exposition of valid cognition, or the second chapter of the Pramanavarttika. So within that, then what is the purpose of the text of the Pramanavarttika? Ultimately, the purpose of it is to show those who are suitable disciples of this, suitable trainees of this kind of subject, how it is that one enters into and proceeds along the entire path of the 3 stages of the path of awakening. So just as we find in the Lumbram or stages of the path kind of exposition of the path, it begins by showing a person how it is that one should develop the aspiration to achieve some higher status within samsara. Based upon that, then one strives to achieve liberation from samsara in general. Then, founded on that, one develops great compassion and develops bodhicitta and proceeds through the path to the achievement of full awakening of Buddhahood. Then the same subject matter is presented in a different format here within the second chapter of the Pramanavarttika, showing how the different stages of the path are to be understood and to be developed by a person who wishes to achieve those stages of the path.
Oh yeah, 근데 인자다 참아 추바세디 제와 좀 된데 주피숨소와 아니 저와 tenye기 엄바데비 ten라 엄바데비 텐때 말아 미루바인자 미루바데다 가래 달래 손발에 세나 아니 주피숨소와 어떻게 엄바데비 텐라 총바인장 참아 추와 대체 대이 제발라 대진나라 참아 르메 제시 가서 참아두고 수시 샤바차 전에 대제라 참아 르메 제시 바세다 대천다 송거래 참아 르메 제시 바세 참아 르메 제시 바세다 가르 송거래 세나 단다 공도 샤바네 좀 된데 저와 되니 좀 오바디베 ten라 미루와 참았단 좀 된데 참아 인순 거 말이야 참말라我就참아点把事참아些个的就참아了就참아啊참아谢我참아是这有啊一张就참아些他就空多我对我就참아一把点把的了没有啊点把他这样就不是说了中华业绩大把让用的아니 탑재 참아 몇 把点把你也别拿呢참아论没见些吧小提给아니 지有了没留啥都没留这把参没参与都点呢是吧参嘛这么参与了然后下了啥都没留这把参没参与点呢台长从把检点的这样俺的朗读今年来点把了俺的没留参嘛一把点有的参嘛里面见些吧才点一把的
So then, again, to go back to the beginning of this, the first of these 5 epithets, person who has become an authority or a source of avenue of valid cognition. With this, in order to understand this, we first have to understand what authority or valid cognition refers to. There are different forms of the term here, which is being translated as authority or valid cognition. In Sanskrit, it's pramana, and in Tibetan, it's tsema. And this term encompasses multiple connotations, but in this particular context, we're referring specifically to an authority in the sense of a person who knows things in a undeceptive manner, and by virtue of their knowledge, that is, they have acquired this non-deceptive knowledge, they are then able to transmit that knowledge, to convey that knowledge to others as well. So non-deceptive knowledge refers to here particularly to a person who has achieved that kind of non-deceptive knowledge. In the context of when one's talking about valid cognition or authoritative cognition knowledge, which is sort of in a more ordinary context, within the context of these texts on epistemology, it's technically defined as knowledge which is non-deceptive and newly acquired in order to exclude other forms of knowledge which don't fall into the category of technically speaking, authoritative or valid cognition in that narrow sense. But here, we're referring to non-deceptive understanding of things, and the person who has acquired that kind of non-deceptive knowledge. And particularly, it pertains to a person who has achieved non-deceptive knowledge, authoritative knowledge of the essential points, the primary topics of what is to be taken up and what is to be abandoned in the course of the path.
Oh yeah, that DJ la, that milu ang song a se te ching chen. That DJ la, chama lu me jian xi cha te chen. That 20 new one never in milu dra le chung yang, oba do ba 20 ro se la that de la, ji dang, ka se milu wa ngo song a da ma jiao bang a cha cha bang a se ni yo yin ba, that de lu ma xie ru shu gui na me na, kan je milu wa chame chen yin ma yin ba chen. 是吧？再对米路啊，哦，安尼这些参嘛，多生多别的吧，这些参嘛马云吧，因此这些米路的吧，因此参嘛马云吧，因张，安尼我吃不吃啊，帮我当，是吧？我都是现在用过的，他，安尼他给的了，就是这种啊，那对不对？修什么的是呢？但是他。 天津牛蛙年蛙因米路站来情况样，做出来所谓天牛蛙让给其他的夏娃的年蛙的米路蛙的让给其他多把的天来年蛙的米路蛙钱，因此让给我的，希望让给我娘咱们就年蛙有马的，是我马家帮我提钱，但来了米路蛙呢，有特别天意呢，找到说话虽然你没了，年轻的层面嘛，修话就如现在，是吧？ 来了没有把的有的多把么特别甜的，然后说我水浆甜美那边，打的了吃不吃帮的了，俺那水浆甜美的这年限，俺那年限了才没才你马上我就说先了，这兄弟吃完了就为年限的缺钱，千万没认为这没的，俺那两个事情我把对面啥子对面，俺写完也没吃的是，呀，说不就就是的哦，也说。
So this thing gets into the definition of what is authoritative knowledge. This occurs at page 180 of the translation, and that we're using Roger Jackson's translation of this chapter, and then it is, I think it's in verse 4 of the root text. This is given in the commentary here, and I'll just read the commentary. So here it says, authority is defined as new, this is on the middle of page 180 of the translation. Authority is defined as new and non-deceptive, is either ascertained by itself or dependent on another, some subsequent authority. If it is A, then no one will be confused in distinguishing authorities from non-authorities. And if B, that ascertaining authority will also require ascertainment as non-deceptive by another subsequent authority. And since that authority will depend on still another, there will be an infinite regress. So the opponent of Master Dharmakirti is saying that is arguing about the definition of the term authority or means of valid cognition, and making the case that one wouldn't be able to define it as Master Dharmakirti has, but Master Gyaltsab Je replies to that at the top of page 180. It is not the case that all authorities are ascertained exclusively by themselves or exclusively by another subsequent authority, because some authorities are ascertained by themselves and some too can be ascertained by another subsequent authority. This follows, and then it goes into a question about apperception, which is mind which is cognizing itself. Because we see that when self-experiencing apperceptive authority cognizes its own essence, by its own power it induces certainty of the part of non-deceptiveness that exists simultaneously within a subsequently identical to it. And because we see that some authorities require ascertainment as non-deceptive authorities by an authoritative designation that arises subsequent to that original cognition of its own authority object. So that's the way that's explained in that comment.
Oh yeah, 当然，而且他在今天。 가서래 대체 다음 중앙진주군 란단 도정 오원이 줄에 제조 예지도 세대 가르친 거래서나 좀된 되지 아니 이시지 아니 좋아 되니 좀 어바도 되나 루와 매바도 담배 시와래 이시티 되니 얘네 다 참아래 저와 다 좋아 되니 좀 어바도 되 란단 도정 오원이 줄에 제조 예지로 세대 좋아 되니 좀 어바도 되나 아니 밀루비 시와디 어바도 되 란도 옛날 시위 밀루비 시와디 아니 밀루비 시와디야 아니 주표수 저와를 반드시 저와 대이지 어바도 베텔라 밀루와 시와디야 아니 권도 시바나시 주표수 저와가 총바를 마도 안따바라 좀비 아니 탐내쳐 봐지 말에 세대라 마제반에 도된데 주원이송 세대 대이베레 와 마제반에 퇴치노 주원이송 세대 제원我听马土生了那他们这前把天你就看了从前呐啥的看了从把这些呐对了俺你他说的说天年了你玩考啊给俺你他们这前把我也送啊当天就看了从别个从下把一都送过的
So the basic point of this is that it's agreeable to say that that authoritative cognition is non-deceptive, but in the context of talking about someone who has become an authority, we're not going to say that that cognition has to necessarily be new in the two-part definition of authoritative cognition as non-deceptive and new. The non-deceptive part of it necessarily has to be the case because here we're talking about the Buddha who has become a person who has become a source of valid cognition, an avenue of valid cognition. So that person necessarily has to be non-deceptive because they have to be able to teach the essential parts of the path, the key points of what has to be taken up and what has to be abandoned while one is proceeding upon the path. But it's not something, they're not something that has to have been absolutely newly originated because they have to have arisen from causes that are, that coincide with, that are in accordance with the kind of result which they have become. So a person who has become a source of valid cognition themselves have to have arisen from understanding of the essential points of what has to be taken up and what has to be abandoned. And so in that sense, they're not newly arisen. So that stipulation that a source of valid cognition has to be new doesn't apply in this particular context. And there's furthermore an excursus within the text about showing how the Buddha couldn't be someone who has occurred, it could be a person who is permanent, that is completely unchanging without any kind of modification, such as some people's notion of a creator deity or God that is an absolute unchanging being. That can't apply to a Buddha because they have to have arisen from, for example, a great compassion for other beings, which is a functional phenomenon that serves as a cause to produce them as an authoritative person, and then likewise their understanding of the nature of reality. Those two kinds of causes that generated them into the state of being authoritative persons preclude them having being this kind of unchanging, permanent being that some people conceive of as a kind of God or creator deity.
Oh yeah, that didn't. That called the Shabana Shin or Tam the Shabati, and it do can't let Chung Chita, Chuna, one or two Chita, the Chumbade Sena, Chusena, and it a Toa Tenila, Nyora Kowagi, and it Tam the Chabasi, the New Sumata. He do can't let in a Chumbi, two Ishawadi, even a Tambote, and it are some of what you take in Sigala, language in a Chi Maloba. 아니 고주고 태한다다 말려봐 쳔바지라 아니 다 이제 지다보다 쳔바 말려봐 쳔바지라 아니 다 가서래 탐제 쳔바지 그래 와 어디 대샤바데라 니 내가 다 타도 그 랑도지 내 말려봐라니 좀 무슨도 투수 치네 시안라 좀 봐자바니 아니 저와 되니라 내가 거기 탐제 참바래 그러와 왜 대탄 봐 대탄도 마로 아니 가서를 아니 수쇼 자고 담바지 대래 현바 안에 가서를 양아를 누나 된적이 쳐봐다 된적이 사실 쳐봐 쇼고 말해서 하다 된다 뒤에 가로서나 랑기 아니 가서를 랑도지네 말려봐라니 좀 무슨도 추수 치네 시안라 좀 봐자봐 되니 아니 좋아 되니로 되니 와나라 여러 코와 그 안에 참바래 대다위 탐제 참바데 나 주강라 되네 템바데라 아니 로라 팬시바 넘바 뜻이 또 시베기 아니 집이 도지 되기 아니 대셰비 권에 아니 개발 샤바텔라 아니 lunjung 권에 아니 덤바 가서래 남관에 집이 추샤바다 lun도 권에 아니 어레 덤바기 아니 갈 아니 두자라 랑도지네 치지 말로 버든니 오다 두시용고 하래
So then here our question is, what is a person who is a source, who is a avenue of valid cognition, a person who has become that source of authoritative knowledge or valid cognition, so in order to know that, we have to know that a source of valid cognition is necessarily non-deceptive. And in order to know what it means to be non-deceptive, we in turn have to know what the essential points of the teaching of the path of what is to be abandoned, what is to be taken up, the key points within the path to awakening, what those are. And so in the context of determining that the Buddha is an omniscient being, what we're investigating here is how it is that the Buddha teaches in a non-deceptive and a completely unerring fashion all of the essential points of the path to liberation and the path to Buddhahood. So this kind of omniscience, in order to establish the possibility of that and that the Buddha actually achieved that, then we in turn need to go through what it means to be a source of valid cognition. That in turn requires us to understand what the essential points of the path to liberation are, and likewise to go through the entire sequence of those 5 epithets that we laid out at the beginning: a person who has become a source of valid cognition, a person who wishes to achieve the aims of other living beings, who wishes to benefit the world, the teacher, the Sugata, and the savior. By laying those out in the forward progression through the sequence that we've presented, then that shows how it is that it's possible that there is such an omniscient teacher that serves as a source of valid cognition, because it's a chain of inference that goes from the first to the fifth, and then going from the fifth to the first in turn shows how it is that such a person is able to serve as a teacher and a savior and a protector for all of the beings that are within the world. So the forward progression is presented in order to establish how it is that there could be such an authoritative person. And then the reverse order is presented so as to show how it is that such a person can serve as a savior and a protector for all of the beings that are within the world. And within that context, there's the explanation of what omniscience is, and particularly in this context, the exclusion of ideas about what an omniscient being is that are incompatible with the actual characteristic of omniscience, which the primary characteristic here being the source of valid cognition that's able to unerringly explain the key points of the what is to be taken up and what is to be abandoned in the course of the path.
Oh yeah, and the Kadasung is and a castle. Lunjungu Guana Shabata, Lundo Guana Shabasa, Tanga, the Tamanam de Luiwa Gokish, Aniba Castle, Shundan, the Dot Dizuzo Chagu. They in the Lunjungu Shabata, Lundo Shaba said the candidates and a Church Castle, Church, Tama Juan, Rolla Pensia, Dumba de She Jup, the Kana Sumana Chene. or 루지 투지 콤바 되네 이제 전부 콤바라 되네 좋아 담에 또 비셔라 대라 되네 아니 대시 대라 되네 줘봐 주가 그 좀바디 두스마 체지 걸음다 좀 발루라 충을 받다 받다라 루중 거 관에 좀 셋세 봐세 말이 눈도기 권한 이제 셋봐대라 아니 좀 된대지 아니 저번에 스시 동안에 줘봐대 셋 뒤시라 대세세 대세세 대세라 덤바세 대세라 저완이 샤바데 눈중게 걸음 텔란도데 루레 돈에 샤바데라 눈도그 권에서 샤바세 어디이요 아이고 이제 눈도 세게 저지 걸음다 샤바다 텔란도데 샤바
So then again to repeat there's the 5 epithets of a person who has become a source of valid cognition, avenue of valid cognition, or an authority is the way this is translated in the translation, who desires to achieve, to benefit living beings, the teacher, the sugata, the savior. That's the forward progression of presenting this, and that's laid out in order to demonstrate in a chain of a sequence of inferences, how it is that that a Buddha can be a source of valid cognition, and then in reverse, it's showing how it is that such a savior is able to serve as a source of valid cognition for living beings. So the establishment of the teacher as that source of valid cognition is laid out in the forward progression, and then showing how that being functions as a savior to liberate sentient beings from samsara is presented in the reversal of that forward progression of the 5 epithets.
Oh yeah, that I just show an Asian Samba Prism Tower, and the one you show Samba Prism Tower. 这玩意就全部了，叫我不算做吧，他们我什么都不老穷呀。在那点呢，咱们就提议了点呢，空头下巴给让点当，俺你让点爸爸婆婆在这，俺你多把这些顺便的穷，爸爸这些顺便多把这些顺便提多不的，俺你先动俺来炒啊个叫我的穷啊一张，用俺妈来起码穷啊一张，俺你这个这些给我的看人，云山看的人是呢，关键。제제그 주 안에 좀 해봐도 봐 가야 그쳐도 그냥 제제그 좀 해봐 잡대 가봐 제제그 좀 해봐 대비 로도 가비 치도 안에 다 노중 샤바도 시야마인 말이 공개 제제그 주 해봐 대비 로도 가비 치도 중앙망아마라 때네 안에 대부 그냥 중화돼 여봐도
So then, again, this forward progression is presented to show how it is that through the development of that desire to help living beings, and then likewise the wisdom that understands the selflessness of selflessness, those two, the attitude and the activity the activity of developing that wisdom. How those serve to produce one as the teacher being the teacher, then establishing that shows how it is that one is sugata, how it is one is a sugata, then establishes the existence of the being as the Buddha as the savior. So this forward chain of inferences linked together then is designed to eliminate the misconceptions about the nature of omniscience.
Oh yeah, 다 되네 되네 그 얘기지 좀 받지. 다 되네 다 눈도 그 가서 다진기 아니 대답면대 봐. 아니 다 가서래 좀 된데 예 아니 또봐 참 제발 좀 된지 대신아와도 가려야 되나 좋아해서나 양나 쪽 야바신이 때마고서 교육 따라 되네. 是吧？什么先东局长接完了，就比东局长接完了，就比大了点呢。俺你多把七八什么点你，俺你得想我得出，是吧？啊，我看这人是写了浪，得些浪多得想我的，看这人就比大了，写了浪多进来，七斤马路吧，接我他。 那边闲了嘛了把让给电表过呢，都叫东局长接完了，就把这把人子就为咱们来打了点呢，得是得住，是吧？这里样，开始第一天都咱们那边写了有人都恐怕前边，俺你叫培训说话俺都是他，提打嘞，俺你开始嘞，太阳啊这了，太阳俺都当你那边写了俺都照顾话的，俺你提打来就，这些个打来。 다음에 또 배치랑 어디 상황에 좀 대방 어디 상황에 또 덤비 달에 저완이지 좀 어디 좀 루지 투지 코면에 세기 저완이지 좀 공부 어디 상황에 봐 두바 연장 오다 군전 시지기 준매바 대박이 로도 갑이 체도 어느다 눈도 그 값수 아니 가서 눈중 그 값이 고름 대란 도대 어디 여봐 这些대다 온도 상위 도지 안에 온도 상황을 때는 안에 가서 대시에다 아니 교비다지 대시에다 대시게 땅 온도 될 때는 안에 또마다 또마 아니 이제 좀要좀 아마아마 온도 상위 도지 안에 두어 인자 되라 누도 가지고 그냥 시지가 좀 해봐 두어지
그게 시제기
다시 그게 제지가 좀 해. 그게 시버셔와 또버셔와 좀 해 봐도 돼.
어디 공다 디코모츠 거즈마송
그게 시버셔와 좀 해 봐. 갑자기 눈도 셔봐도체. 그들에서나 최지 그 걸음을 도한테 셔봐. 좀 된데 또봐 참대 또봐 쳐버려지 대신아와도 가르에서나 시에는 또 대신랑도 탑당 제와 로베 샤라라 말해봐 아니 쪼와 잡히칠 와 현대도 남의 또 베셔라 유리도 공방 온도 제발 저 표준서와 온도送的 와 어디 교비 달에 아니 저 표준서와 온도送嘛대신 교비 달에 대신 온도 送的 대신 그때 할 달에 저 다음에 또 비싸랑 온도 상황에 쭉. 저 다음에 또 비싸라고 했다래. 저번 이제 좀 온도 상황에 쭉 봐. 와, 다시 저번 이제 좀 몰라 때네. 다음에 또 비싸라 좀. 다음에 또 비싸라 때네. 대시를 때네 저와 죽스 좀 봐라 봐. 야. 나 단데 그래서는 저가 저기 달라 대신 온도 상황에 쭉. 这些个大嘞，就咱们都别写了，我就送我就走。就咱们都别写了，来光把那带呢，这我你就去问我就送我走吧。呀。
So then this forward sequence is designed to eliminate misconceptions about the way in which omniscience is produced. And then by going through that whole chain of inferences presented in the 5 epithets in the forward progression, one is able to establish how it is that the Buddha is the protector. And then based upon the protector or savior, then having established that the Buddha is a savior or protector, one is able to go back through the chain of inferences in the reverse fashion using the savior, the establishment of the Buddha as a savior, as the as the evidence or the reason, by means of that, one is able to infer that the Buddha is the Sugata, the one who's achieved gone to bliss. But based upon that, one is able to establish that the Buddha is the teacher. Based upon that, using that as evidence, one is able to establish that the Buddha is a person who desires to teach to save the world. Then, based upon that, one is able to infer again that the Buddha is a source, avenue of valid cognition. So these two chains of inference are designed. The forward progression is designed to eliminate misconceptions about the causes that produce misconceptions about the causes, the things that produce omniscience. And then the reverse sequence is designed to establish omniscience, the omniscience of the Buddha, and the Buddha as an authoritative teacher in a positive sort of fashion. The two are linked in that fashion.
Oh yeah, that is I think about it. You ngama do ba she ji ki ba da ba so ta ta ki ani da 가서 수숨 세가라 참대 주비 초대 아니다 랑가 마도 봐 샤라 치지 말로 봐 때문에 봐 인상 아니 가서래 때문에 봐 인상 아니 텐다와디 샤라 치지 말로 봐 때말라 아니 랑가 치지 말로 봐 샤와도 거와디 랑가 마도 봐 샤라 치지 말로 봐 때문에 바탕 아니 중앙망원도 마송와라 제우 중앙 인장 제우 태단 지수 튼바게 아니 중앙마 가소래 마망아마라 로거와 말아발라 아니 대봉원도 좀 미스바 인장 다 되게 참대 된지 말이야 현在这玩意想不进门呐现在东阿去3月去的不把差不谈对了把这门去往这吧是吧现在这玩意想不门呐现在东阿少了些把给不把差不谈对了把门去往延长延长现在东阿少了不把差不切把了安那上现在年纪为年轻我就做过吧这样让给普及比东阿少了切把了不把切比切什么几就现在了就现在了没什么难行是吧这了现在了没些了这了说完了吃吧俺你继续大气没有个事情一张现在东阿今那完了没事被人家接吧了你根本是人家接吧了俺你告诉叫我吃吧了俺了人家接吧就过过这
So then, in the case of establishing an inference, the inferences are established through kind of reasoning, which is, so we use inference when we wish to prove something to someone else. That is, someone else holds a view that we disagree with. So in order to persuade them of a correct understanding, an understanding that we have, then we have to use inference. The way in which that's done is through presenting a subject, a predicate, and reason or evidence that establishes the existence of the predicate in the subject. And there's a concatenation of relations that have to obtain among the three different members of an inference, the subject, the predicate, and the evidence. We won't go into all of that at the moment. But in brief, if one has a complex argument that one is presenting, we have first, in order to establish something, it can depend upon our establishment of something else prior to that. That in turn can depend upon the establishment of something prior to that, and so on with a chain of inferences. So it's just like an extended chain of causality where an effect arises from an event that preceded it in time, in some long duration, and that event, the actual effect, was produced by a cause that preceded it, that in turn, that cause was produced by an effect that preceded that, and so on through time, going back to the initial cause that one is identified as being the source of the final effect in the chain of causality. The same thing applies to inference, where you have a whole chain of reasoning which is constructed through a final kind of knowledge that one wishes to induce within the person you're arguing with. That may require an entire chain of inference built back to the past, going back to some kind of common evidence that you both agree upon. So you start off with something that you and the other person agree upon, and then through a chain of inferential reasoning, you establish something that they may not agree upon, but then you can induce them to accept that based on something that they do agree upon, and so on through the whole chain of reasoning. Well, in the context here, one's attempting to initially dispel misconceptions about the nature of omniscience, and particularly about the omniscient one, the Buddha, who is our teacher. And so in order to establish the character of this omniscient one, you have to establish initially that, first of all, it's possible that someone could develop a kind of great compassion and love for others that doesn't discriminate against other beings, kind of universal compassion and love that applies to all beings in general. So in order to do that, one has to establish that compassion in principle, that there is such a compassion that doesn't discriminate among other beings, like friends and people that you're indifferent towards, not to mention enemies, but rather there's a compassion that applies to all beings in general.
Oh yeah, that's it. And that also you take the shit to buggy, and you can't raise and the shit to buggy car, and it 대시 주제 잠바 단다디 군전 시지기 주메바 되게 대송거 아래 이나 줘베 대시 주비기 아니 초제 참망여와 쳬비 수가래서나 좀 된데지 송랍래 아니 라니 두잔남라 대시랑도 탑다자와 두잔나라 대시랑도 탑다담바 떼와 땀바데 무슨지 주바 와 대시랑도 탑다담바데 무슨지 주바에나 대신랑도 타다 담바 담바 되니 아니 좀 되게 랑그 친지 말로 바 담바 이남原地 显现那把接巴那是吧 아니 다 친지 말로 바 담바데 사전 디가라 아니 다 대시 코와지도 그런 바데 챔비관에 아니 담바데 생송거래是吧 显现接巴那아니 사전 예는 이 풍봉하고 되다 아니 동아지 라시지 코와 대시 세가나 동아대바 군주대바 아니 고바대바 남대바 세라와 대시 컨트리 대시나니 두된 가와레서나 아니 사전 예리지 풍보 동아 고마 제한 풍보 셔바 그 때문에 사전 예리지 풍보 대다 동아지 라시지 코와 세가나 유련이 주 왕그 총요 코와다 다들이 대우 동아대 동아대 규매를 미중아 인상 유카를 때에서는 아니 군중 내다니모 와티 군중의 주체밖에 아니 동아대 시와다 동아 시와 제대삼바 아니 동아 매도나 동아의 주방과 인상 군중대 주체밖에 군중 방자다 그와 아니 동아 거비 동안 가베 차와되지 그 동안 예와를 시어봐마 동안 가베 과바데 탑차다 남의 모습도 또 현자바데 아니 동안 가바를 쳐봐라 동아지 주봉 방고와 인다 주봉제 가르래서나 남의 모습도 집에 셔라기 군중 반에 아니 동안 고비 가베 타방 온도 쳐봐데 아니 오도 시기를 발라 봐 오도 리베트를 발랐다나 주바
No. So in order to establish that someone is protect the Savior, that is the fifth of these five epithets, one has to begin by establishing that it's possible that there could be a compassion which doesn't discriminate between self and others, which is universal and applied to all beings without any kind of exception. In order to do that, one has to establish that there could be a Buddha, someone who has achieved the state of, it could be a Sugata, someone who has actualized all of those attainments of the attainment of the abandonment of all of the things that are to be abandoned, as well as the actualization of all of the realizations, the two key factors of becoming a Buddha. And then in order to establish that, that there is such a thing as a Buddha, we have to, the way we make that inference is by showing that such a person is a teacher, and the teacher here is not a teacher in general, but is specifically someone who teaches the Four Noble Truths in an unerring and perfect fashion without any kind of error. So the Four Noble Truths, just briefly, refer to if we go to them in reverse order, you have, well, we're starting off with cessation. For there to be such a thing as cessation of suffering, there has to be a means by which cessation can occur, and that in turn is the path. For the path to make any sense, or for there to be any purpose to be a path, and in turn for there to be any cessation, there has to be a cessation of something, which is itself is samsara, suffering and in all of its various forms. For suffering to exist, there has to be a source of suffering. And so the basic Four Noble Truths are laid out in that fashion. If we look at them from the opposite direction, we say there is suffering. We say, well, if suffering exists, where does it arise from? Then we infer from that it has a cause, and we're able to ascertain all of the various causes of samsaric suffering. Based upon that, if we wish to achieve the freedom from that kind of suffering, we have to say that, well, there has to be an actual state of suffering, and that freedom from suffering is itself the cessation of suffering. For there to be a cessation of suffering, there has to be a means by which that can be actualized, and that in turn is the path. So these four noble truths, are then linked in themselves in a chain of inferences. That is, we can infer the existence of the source of suffering we can infer the source of suffering from suffering itself. Suffering is a result, and that has to come about from its cause, the origin of suffering, which is the source of it. And cessation is a kind of outcome or result which occurs due to the path, which functions as a kind of cause of the cessation of suffering. So those are linked in a causal fashion which can be established through inference. All of these together are linked together in a chain of inferences that we can establish logically. And all of that comes down to then the first of the Four Noble Truths, suffering, is something that we in turn have to be able to establish through the force of fact, commonly established facts that can be ascertained through ordinary means of knowledge, which are accessible to everyone in common, not the result of inference necessarily, but rather through common experience and the things that everyone is able to understand in common. The technical term for this is, it's actually, we're only able to establish the reality of suffering through a kind of inference, but the foundation for that inference itself is in turn common experience. And so the inference which enables us to establish the truth of suffering is called inference, which operates through the force of things which are commonly known, or facts, one could say. So based upon that, then one's able to establish the noble truths, the Four Noble Truths. Four Noble Truths enables one to establish the teacher. Being the teacher enables us to establish the Sugata. Sugata enables us to establish the existence of the Savior. So going through the chain of inference in that way, we're able to establish the Savior in that way, but working backwards from Savior through teacher, then we're able to establish the teacher through the establishment of the validity of the Four Noble Truths, which in turn is established through the inference, which is based on kind of common experience.
Oh yeah. 나한테 시원하시 이제 꾸준반에 동아가고 고방원도 제바데 예시두제를 봤다. 아니 뭐도 주게 때나 집에 제바 체면해 와나 제바게 체면해 와나 아니 좀 된데 누자라 예시랑주 치지 말로 봤대 땜반이도야 아니 내가 주 그래 와 나도 준전 대시니 된다지 좋아 체배 값수 아니 대시랑도 탑당 제바 땜라 봐봐대 아니 뭐도 시지를 봐 예시주바게 뭐도 시지를 봐대 아니 개발 소바래
So again, then, how is it that we establish the Four Noble Truths? The Four Noble Truths are established through inference, which is based on the basic, commonly experienced nature of things, entities which can be ascertained through common experience, or facts, one could say. So inference, which operates through the force of facts, by the power of facts, serves as the basis for establishing the Four Noble Truths. Four Noble Truths, the inferences which establish Four Noble Truths, then enable us to infer the teacher as a source of valid knowledge, particular teacher here being the Buddha, and then going through the chain of inferences up the line that is able to establish the Sugata and Savior as well.
Oh yeah. Oh, today is that I just want to share about nation channel. Oh, you lodo, Lujuna, Ludo, Girimba shared the Tajun want to share about nation channel. You will catch a tablet chamber, Toby, Tab Kashi, Combat Chavala, then can you talk about Gunjandi, Chuvadi, and Gigi, you are married. 그 제제지죠 매바이다 준전 대지리 탑재 첨바세가데 요아 말에 햄버거 로도 고발라 공도 샤바고 아니 요즘그를 받대 마셔 아니 왕주다고 다바랑 용기 지우 탐재 첨바인지 다바랑 용기 왕주다고 다바랑 용기 지우지기 아니 탐재 첨바인지 윤례되바그 아니 그게 탐재 첨바 요아 말에 미다세야데 어디세비치도 군제 시지그 좀해봐 여기 타가버가 루독샤바 다시 지원다 시험해봐.
So thus, this chain of inference is designed, again, to establish. There are people who might say, there's no such thing as an omniscient one, who is a teacher, who is a source of valid cognition as it pertains to the path to awakening. So anything that comes out of that is something we don't believe in. So in order to disprove that misconception that there is no such thing as an omniscient being that functions as a teacher of the path, then all of these, and in order to dispel all kinds of misconceptions about the nature of that omniscience, then this sequence of inferences which begins with establishing the nature of the Four Noble Truths, establishing the teacher as based upon the Four Noble Truths, establishing the Sugata based on the teacher, and establishing the Savior based on the teacher. All of those that chain of inferences is designed to dispel those misconceptions about the nature of the omniscient one, the nature of the Buddha.
Oh yeah, that 된다고 가르래서나 아니 lun이와티 가수 lun중 가수 아니 저 티바치비 남지를 봤다 봤지 저번이 지버려 때네 아니 남바탑지 비시 총주 룬도게 가수 저 타바 쳐버 세베 탑지 티바 아니 티바 투모마 티바 투모마 아니 남지를 봐 아니 대신 오르서 어디 연바시라 아니 고아지도 그래 봐 공부하라 써봐 쳐봐지 다 떼봐 쳐봐 임바리.
So then the forward progression that we're presenting here, as we've described it, beginning with showing that the person who has become an avenue of valid cognition, i.e. the Buddha, is someone who desires to help the world, and establishing that through the chain of inferences, establishing the Four Noble Truths and the teacher and so forth. All of that sequence, the process of inferences in the forward progression through those epithets of the Buddha is presented from a Mahayana perspective. That is, it starts out by showing the nature of great compassion and establishing the omniscient one as the teacher of, showing the validity of the Mahayana path. Then the reverse process, showing the protector, Sugata, teacher, and that sequence, and then showing the Four Noble Truths in that sequence, is presented to show how the Buddha functions as a teacher for the path in the common perspective, not specifically a Mahayana way of presenting the path.
Oh yeah, that's
So we'll stop there today.
Guru Rana Mendra Lagani Adaya Me Oya.